The United States appears to be edging closer to a direct confrontation in the Caribbean. The Trump administration is expanding its military presence near Venezuela, while Russia and China accuse the U.S. of pushing the region towards crisis. According to a Wall Street Journal report, American special operations aircraft now deployed in the region. At least 10 of those Osprey-tilt rotor planes arrived from the Air Force Base in New Mexico, reportedly boosting U.S. capability for rapid missions across the region. At sea, American forces continue seizing tankers and striking suspected drug trafficking boats as part of an expanding blockade effort. Venezuela, backed by Russia and China, called for a second emergency meeting at the United Nations, accusing Washington of unlawful aggression.
There is no war in the Caribbean. There is no international armed conflict, nor is there a non-international armed conflict. It is therefore absurd for the United States government to attempt to justify its actions by applying the rules of the law of war.
Pueda cumplir a cabalidad su mandato.
U.S. ambassador to the UN, meanwhile, told the UN Security Council that the single most serious threat to the region is what he described as transnational terrorist and criminal groups. In fact, Russia and China criticized the U.S. tactics at the United Nations, calling it cowboy behavior, intimidation, and one that violates all key norms of international law. Moscow has warned that Washington could soon target other Latin American governments seen as unfriendly, and reports say Russia has started evacuating families of diplomats from Caracas. Listen to this.
The United States has been continuing to deliberately foment tensions around the friendly nation of Venezuela under the pretext of combating drug trafficking and the terrorist threat.
In fact, China echoed those concerns, urging restraint and warning that unilateral sanctions deepen instability.
China opposes all acts of unilateralism and bullying and supports all countries in defending their sovereignty and national dignity.
As the U.S. builds pressure with troops, aircraft, and its rhetoric, the question is whether this standoff stops short or an all-out conflict is imminent.
Well, you had a different kind of a president before me. They didn't mind being ripped off. They didn't mind being robbed. They didn't mind drugs pouring into our country. They didn't mind the jails of Venezuela and Trinidad being emptied into the U.S., where they take over Colorado and other places.
The Treasury Department is diving deep into more than 100 money service businesses along the U.S.-Mexico border, suspecting ties to drug cartels. Officials have issued 6 notices of investigation, sent dozens of referrals to the IRS, and mailed over 50 compliance letters after reviewing 1 million currency transaction reports and nearly 87,000 suspicious activity reports. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says it's part of President Trump's campaign to root out cartel money laundering from the financial system using advanced data-driven tools. Bessent added that under Trump, these barbaric terrorist cartels can no longer operate with impunity. The crackdown has also targeted high-profile figures, including Venezuelan influencer DJ Rosita, sanctioned this month for allegedly supporting the Tren de Aragua cartel. Former Canadian Olympic snowboarder Ryan Weddy, now a top drug lord in Mexico, has also faced sanctions. Meanwhile, Russia's foreign ministry is evacuating families of its diplomats from Venezuela as President Nicolas Maduro's hold on power weakens. A European intelligence source says Moscow views the situation in very grim terms despite its public support for the key ally. Russia's options are limited with its military tied up in Ukraine and little influence in the Western Hemisphere. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters the U.S. won't let it escalate tensions with Russia over Venezuela, calling their rhetoric expected but not significant. Russia has warned against U.S. escalation, even as Trump's team has seized Venezuelan oil tankers and struck more than 100 drug traffickers in the Caribbean and Pacific since early September.
For the first time ever, the U.S. has carried out a strike on land in Venezuela, and the target? A dock allegedly used to load boats with narcotics. Donald Trump shocked the world, revealing a major explosion at a Venezuelan facility. He refused to give details. CNN and the New York Times report that the CIA carried out the strike, marking the first known U.S. operation inside Venezuelan territory. According to Colombian President Gustavo Petro, the target was a cocaine factory in Maracaibo, allegedly controlled by the ELN guerrilla group. Trump himself refused to confirm whether the CIA was involved, saying, "I know exactly who it was, but I don't want to say who it was." No images or footage of the strike have been released, unlike previous U.S. strikes on drug smuggling boats, which were publicly documented. Since September, the U.S. has launched 30 strikes against alleged drug smuggling vessels, mostly in the Pacific and Caribbean, killing over 100 people. Trump has threatened land strikes in Venezuela before, but this dock strike could mark a dramatic escalation in the pressure campaign against Nicolás Maduro. So far, the Venezuelan government has stayed silent. State media has not reported the incident, and Maduro has accused the U.S. of using a war on drugs as a cover to target his government. Recent U.S. actions also include a naval blockade of sanctioned oil tankers, seizure of 2 oil tankers and pursuit of a third, deployment of a large military force to the Caribbean. Maduro calls it piracy, while Trump hints that the ultimate goal could be to weaken or remove him from power. The U.S. claims the strike was part of an anti-drug campaign, but experts say Venezuela is mainly a transit country, not a major drug producer. Most narcotics entering the U.S. come via Mexico, not Venezuelan ports. Still, a land strike marks a dangerous turning point. This is not just about drugs, it's about geopolitics, power, and escalating tension in the Americas. For the first time, the U.S. has struck Venezuelan soil. Is this a warning, a pressure tactic, or the start of something far bigger?
Our top focus on beyond at this hour, President Masoud Pezeshkian says that Iran is at war with the United States, Israel and Europe, claiming that these countries do not want Tehran to stand on its feet. Pezeshkian also issued a warning, and he said that Iran is now stronger than the recent 12-day war, and any new enemy provocation will face a stronger response. He claimed that Iran's enemies are hoping that something happens internally so they can begin their intervention. In an interview published on the official site of Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, the Iranian president said, "In my opinion, we are at total war with the United States, Israel and Europe. They want to bring our country to its knees." He added that they are putting us in difficulty and constraint, creating problems in terms of livelihood, culturally, politically and security-wise, while raising society's expectations. Well, Pezeshkian's statements coincide with plans for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to the United States. It is being reported that Netanyahu may present President Trump with a new plan of action against Iran. Remember, Israel and Iran engaged in a 12-day war in June. The U.S. later joined the operation when Trump ordered strikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities in June. The United States and its allies accuse Iran of seeking to acquire nuclear weapons, a claim that Tehran has repeatedly denied. Trump has announced a maximum pressure policy against Iran that has included sanctions designed to economically cripple the country and dry up its oil reserves from sales, and this is on the global market. Now, France, Britain and Germany led a campaign that resulted in the reimposition of UN sanctions on Iran in September over its nuclear program.
Tensions in the Middle East just took a dramatic turn. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has declared that Iran is already in a full-fledged war with the United States, Israel, and Europe, a statement that is raising alarms across the world. Speaking in an interview published on the website of Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, Pezeshkian accused Western powers of trying to prevent Iran from standing on its own feet. He said, "They are besieging us from every aspect," pointing to economic pressure, sanctions, political isolation, and security threats. Pezeshkian's comments come at a critical moment. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is preparing to travel to Washington for talks with President Donald Trump, with Iran expected to be at the top of the agenda. Just months ago, Trump ordered U.S. airstrikes on 3 Iranian nuclear facilities, a move that escalated an already dangerous standoff between Iran and Israel. Those strikes became a turning point in what is now known as the 12-day war, a short but intense conflict that ended with a ceasefire brokered by Trump in late June. But according to Iran's president, the war never truly ended. With Trump back in the White House and crippling sanctions reinstated, Pezeshkian says Iran is facing pressure on every front, from trade and currency to culture and security. He warned that while Iran's economy is being squeezed, expectations inside the country are rising, making the situation even more volatile. Behind the scenes, tensions are rising fast. Israel has reportedly warned the United States that recent Iranian missile drills could be masking preparations for a surprise attack. Western intelligence agencies have also detected unusual Iranian air activity, fueling concerns of an escalation. Israeli military leaders have raised these warnings directly with top U.S. commanders, signaling that the situation could spiral quickly. Pezeshkian insisted Iran is stronger today than during the 12-day war, claiming improved equipment and manpower. He said, if the enemy chooses confrontation, they will face a more decisive response. The stakes are painfully real. In June, Israeli airstrikes and covert operations inside Iran killed more than 1,000 people, including senior military officials and nuclear scientists. Iran responded by launching hundreds of missiles and drones at Israel, killing at least 33 people. The United States later joined the conflict directly, bombing Iranian nuclear facilities on June 22nd. The big question: is this just political rhetoric or the warning sign of something much bigger? With nuclear facilities hit, missile drills underway, sanctions tightening, and leaders on all sides issuing threats, the fear is growing that the Middle East could be inching towards a wider and far more dangerous conflict. The ceasefire may be holding, but the war of words, pressure, and preparation is far from over.
A war of words is turning sharper and louder. A threat from Donald Trump, a defiant reply from Tehran. Missiles, nukes, and red lines are back in the spotlight as Washington signals force and Iran warns of consequences that will not be forgotten. This is not diplomacy. This is deterrence spoken in ultimatums. Iran's president has fired a sharp warning in response to Donald Trump's latest threat. On social media, Masoud Pezeshkian vowed that any new aggression against Iran would be met with a severe and regret-inducing response. The message was unmistakable. Tehran will not absorb another strike quietly. The warning came hours after Trump escalated his rhetoric from U.S. soil. Standing beside Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Florida, the U.S. president threatened to eradicate any attempt by Iran to rebuild its nuclear or missile capabilities. He claimed future strikes could be more powerful than the last. Trump's remarks marked a notable shift. For the first time, he openly linked potential U.S. military action not only to Iran's nuclear program, but also to its conventional missile systems, a pillar of Iran's defense strategy. Iranian officials reject Washington's framing. They insist their nuclear program remains peaceful, pointing to repeated international inspections and denials of weapons development. Tehran accuses the U.S. of using unverified claims to justify military pressure. Iran's response did not stop with the president. Ali Shamkhani, a senior advisor to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, warned that Iran's missile capabilities are not subject to foreign permission. Any miscalculation, he said, would trigger an immediate and harsh response beyond expectations. For decades, Tehran has described its missile arsenal as purely deterrent, a shield in a region crowded with U.S. bases and hostile forces. Iranian leaders say limiting missile range would leave the country exposed to long-range threats. Iran has also rejected demands to dismantle its nuclear infrastructure, calling them violations of international law and the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Instead, officials accuse Washington of maintaining a policy of coercion, backed by sanctions and force. The tension is not unfolding in isolation. The United States joined Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites earlier this year, deepening hostilities and reinforcing Tehran's warnings that future confrontations will not be symbolic. As the rhetoric intensified, Moscow urged restraint. The Kremlin called for dialogue and warned against steps that could push the region toward wider conflict. Russia emphasized that escalation would benefit no one. With threats traded publicly and military options discussed openly, the standoff has entered a dangerous phase. Washington signals dominance, Tehran signals defiance, and between them lies a region where one misstep could turn warnings into war.
I'd like to know if you and the Prime Minister talked about having Israel pull back its troops before Hamas fully disarms. I know that's been an issue. Did you push for that today?
Well, we talked about Hamas and we talked about disarmament, and they're going to be given a very short period of time to disarm, and we'll see how that works out. Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner will be in charge of that from our side, but if they don't disarm, as they agreed to do, they agreed to it, and then they'll be held to pay for them. And we don't want that. We're not looking for that. But they have to disarm within a fairly short period of time.
Was Israel withdrawing its forces?
Well, that's a separate subject. We'll talk about that.
Mr. President,
Yes.
Mr. President, did you have a message for the Prime Minister about the West Bank? And are you at all concerned that settler violence, Israeli settler violence, could be undermining the peace plan?
Well, we have had a discussion, big discussion, for a long time on the West Bank, and I wouldn't say we agree on the West Bank 100%, but we will come to a conclusion on the West Bank.
If I could ask, what is the decision?
Well, I don't want to do that. It'll be announced at an appropriate time. But he will do the right thing. I know that. And speaking of Iran, I hope they're not trying to build up again, because if they are, we're going to have no choice but very quickly to eradicate that buildup. So I hope Iran is not trying to build up, as I've been reading that they're building up weapons and other things. And if they are, they're not using the sites that we obliterated, but they're using possibly different sites. We know exactly where they're going, what they're doing, and I hope they're not doing it because we don't want to waste the fuel on a B-2. It's a 37-hour trip both ways. I don't want to waste a lot of fuel.
And also the nuclear weapon, but after the meeting, after what you know from the intelligence, how close are we to another war with Iran?
Well, I don't want to say that, but Iran may be behaving badly. It hasn't been confirmed. But if it's confirmed, look, they know the consequences. Consequences will be very powerful, maybe more powerful than the last time. Yeah.
Can I follow up on?
And Iran should have made a deal the last time. I gave them the option. I said, you can make a deal. Do it. I told them, do it. And they didn't believe me. Now they believe me.
Exercises basically to test encircling Taiwan. Can you explain to us what your knowledge is of that? What do you think about that? Have you had any discussions with China?
Well, I have a great
that?
relationship with President Xi, and he hasn't told me anything about it. I certainly have seen it, but he hasn't told me anything about it, and I don't believe he's going to be doing it.
Does it worry you?
No, nothing worries me.
But
nothing.
you said where there's smoke, there's fire, right? So if
Yeah.
you're in circle, if you're doing naval exercises and air
Well,
exercises.
they've been doing naval exercises for 20 years in that area. Nothing you can do about it. He's just a very incompetent man, but we're going to probably bring a lawsuit against him. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Bibi, congratulations.
Mr. President, when do you expect an announcement then on Powell's replacement?
January sometime.
And will you ask Jay Powell to resign
Well,
from
he
the
should
board
resign,
entirely?
be a favor to the nation. But he's come close. I mean, we're getting pretty close.
Will
I would fire him. I'd love to fire him, but we're so close, maybe. But maybe I still might.
Will you sell F-35 to Turkey?
Say it?
Are you going to approve a selling of F-35 to Turkey?
We're thinking about it very seriously.